Namaskar and welcome to our next session on yogic life. So here we have a very important topic, that is how to increase bhakti. So when we talk about Prakriti is Nitya Nivritta. So she slowly wanes on the Pratisanchar Dhara, right? Everybody, whether it is a jnani or a sadhaka or a bhakta or an experienced person or a mahapurush, everybody says that Prakriti is Nitya Nivritta. So in every minute there is a akshaya of the Prakriti, right? So when we have, if you're doing an yajna, you in the yajna generally they put the ghee and they put the sticks and they lit the fire, and the fire is burning, right? In this Jagat Rupi fire, right? In this Jagat is like that fire which is burning, and in that fire, like how in the yajna in the yajna the fire is burning like this Jagat is actually burning, and slowly there is a kshaya. That ghee is in the form of Prakriti, and there is a kshaya of the Prakriti. So this, in order to protect the Srishti, right, and make way forward, there is a kshaya of Prakriti. The Prakriti wanes, right? There is a decreasing influence of Prakriti on the Pratisanchar Dhara. So if we look, this is kind of an ordinary understanding. If you look at it from from the perspective of sadhana or from the perspective of darshanik drishti. So this srishti is happening because of the gunas of Prakriti that we know. The gunas of Prakriti impact the Purusha, and the srishti happens. But what is Prakriti doing? Right? Prakriti is also doing a dhyana of Parama Purusha. Prakriti is doing a sadhana of Parama Purusha. Right? And when we say Prakriti, there is a kshaya of Prakriti. What do we mean? So Prakriti is doing a sadhana of Parama Purusha, and she is engrossed in Parama Purusha. So what happens is that by taking the bhavana of Parama Purusha, so whether when somebody takes the bhavana of Parama Purusha, whether they like it or not, they become that entity, right? They convert themselves into that entity, to that Parama Purusha. Like that, Prakriti, by taking the bhavana of Parama Purusha, by doing sadhana of Parama Purusha, he is slowly getting converted into that Purusha. Right? He's getting converted into that Purusha. So that is what we mean by Nitya Nivritta. Right? So her influence is waning. How can if she is existing, if Prakriti is existing, then her influence will definitely be there. Right? But if by doing sadhana, if she is getting herself converted into that Purusha, then slowly her influence is reducing. Right? So the question is, how do we increase this bhakti bhava? So a sadhaka, his mind is towards Parama Purusha. His mind is focused on Parama Purusha. So when the mind is focused on Parama Purusha, slowly what happens is that they get closer and closer to Parama Purusha. When they get closer to Parama Purusha, what happens is that the unit mind, right, a portion of the unit mind gets converted into Parama Purusha. So in that state, when a portion of the mind gets converted into Parama Purusha, then what happens is that the remaining portion of the mind, right, will get very, very attracted to Parama Purusha. The unit mind, as it increases the bhakti and as it is focused on Parama Purusha and going nearer and nearer to Parama Purusha, the unit mind, a part of the unit mind gets converted into Parama Purusha. When that happens, in the remaining mind, what happens? The love and affection towards Paramatma increases drastically, because Paramatma is like a magnet. He's a great attractor, and as we think about him, this is what happens. So Prakriti is doing upasana of Paramatma from a very anadikal, right? Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. So a person who knows Paramatma, who understands Paramatma, and who has the bhakti bhava to Paramatma, he becomes Paramatma. There is no doubt about it, right? Then he doesn't have an individual separate existence. He becomes Paramatma and he merges with Paramatma, and therefore there's no separate existence. So even if a person who is not a sadhaka, if he thinks about Paramatma, so Paramatma, if he thinks that Paramatma is Virat, Paramatma is Mahan, and I am Neech, I am Papi, right? I am Adham. If he thinks like that, so what happens is that he he thinks himself of Adam, Papi, Neech. But when he loves Paramapurusha, when the love towards the Paramatma is awakened, so then what happens is they forget that they are Papi, they are Neech, they are Adam, right? So they forget everything. So what they remember, when the love towards Supreme is activated, what they remember only one thing, that I am the progeny of Paramatma, right? Now when his mind is thinking about Paramapurusha, then there is no time to think about whether I am Papi, whether I am Adam, whether I am Neech. There is absolutely no time for that, right? If you're always taking the bhavana of Paramapurusha, your mind is preoccupied all the time with the thoughts of Paramatma, then there is no time to think about yourself, right? So if he was a Papi or he was Adam or Neech, to think about that, there is no time at all, because he is thinking about Paramatma all the time, right? So there is absolutely no time to think about anything else, right? So in a sadhaka's life, the thing which is true, which is ultimate, a thing which is ultimate truth, right? And that is also the same truth for Prakriti. So Prakriti, just like a sadhaka doing sadhana of Paramatma, Prakriti is also doing sadhana of Paramapurusha. Mahakali is doing sadhana of Mahakal. Mahashakti is doing sadhana of Paramapurusha, right? So the Parama Prakriti, right? So the Parama Prakriti is the one who is expressing herself with as this universe, right? Even though the Samagri is Paramapurusha, it is with the gunas that that Paramapurusha is getting manifested in this world as Jagat, right? So that external manifestation is the Bahirmukh Bhava of Prakriti, right? That is the Bahirmukhi Bhava of Prakriti. When Prakriti is doing sadhana of Paramapurusha, then that is the Antarmukhi Bhava of Prakriti. So when Prakriti is doing sadhana of Paramapurusha, then this Bahirmukhi Bhava, the Jagat Rupi Bhava, is getting converted, is getting transformed into the Antarmukhi Bhava. And this is exactly what is called as Leela Vaichitriyam, right? But this whole Srishti is a Leela of Paramapurusha, and when a sadhaka is doing sadhana of Paramapurusha, he was always Bahirmukh, he was always looking external. Then now by doing sadhana, he is converting that Bahirmukh Bhava into Antarmukh Bhava, and this is the Leela Vaichitriyam of Paramapurusha. So, and that is why it is being said that Prakriti is Nitya Nivritta. In every moment, her her influence is decreasing, right? But Prakriti is Anadi Ananta, right? So if Prakriti is Anadi Ananta, then her Kshay is also happening for Anantakal, right? She is Anadi, therefore she cannot be completely decreased, right? Because she is Anadi, Ananta. So then her Ksaya is also happening for Anantakal. So it just goes on and on and on. So compared to Prakriti, because Prakriti is Anadi Ananta, and her influence is decreasing, and she is getting converted into Purusha very, very slowly, because she is Ananta. So it goes on for an infinite period of time. But compared to Prakriti, human beings are more fortunate, right? Why they are more fortunate? Because, so the reason is that when Prakriti, we saying that human beings are more fortunate compared to Prakriti, because when Prakriti is doing sadhana of Paramapurusha, then in order to transform herself into Paramapurusha, it takes infinite time, because she is Ananta, right? She is Anadi Ananta. Therefore, to get transformed into that Paramapurusha, it takes infinite period of time. But what happens is that in the case of Jiva is very fortunate, because they are limited, right? So when they take the bhavana of Paramapurusha, slowly their mind is getting converted into Paramapurusha, and there becomes a time when the mind is completely converted into Paramapurusha. Then they don't have any separate existence. So that is possible in the case of human beings, whereas in the case of Prakriti, because she is Ananta, therefore this converting into Paramapurusha takes forever, right? That is why she is Nitya Nivritta. Sadhaka is also Nitya Nivrittaha, right? But what happens in the case of Sadhaka is that he gets completely converted into Paramatma, and he becomes one with that Paramatma, and he has no separate existence. That is a possibility, because he was limited in the beginning. And as he takes the bhavana of Paramapurusha, he becomes one with that entity. Na alpe sukam asti, bhumaiva sukam. Right? There is no sukam in the limited things. Sukam is in the infinite thing. So there is no sukh in 2 rupees, or there is no sukh in 2 lakhs, or there is no sukh in 2 crores, right? So if somebody gets infinite amount of money, then they could get the happiness, right? But nobody can get this infinite amount of money, right? So if somebody were to eat rasagulla, and if they eat one rasagulla, they will not get you know infinite happiness. They eat 10 rasagullas, they're not going to get infinite happiness. They have to eat infinite number of rasagullas to get that infinite happiness, right? Which they will never get, right? Which they can never eat. Infinite amount of rasagullas they can never eat, right? But when the mind takes the bhava of Paramapurusha, and when it becomes magna in that, right, then it merges into that Paramapurusha. That Paramapurusha who is an Adi Ananta Satta, who is Sachidananda. Then there is no separate existence. The mind dissolves in Paramapurusha. So that is why it is said that everybody should learn sadhana at a very young age, right? So a person who is intelligent, who is very intelligent, he will learn sadhana at a very young age, right? So to obtain happiness is the swabhava of human beings. So we do everything in this world, we do different activities in this world, right? We go to work, we do so many things. And why do we do all those things? Because we want to get happiness. So for getting that happiness only, we do different things. So Sukha is the adhara on the basis of which we do different things. And Paramapurusha is the Sukha Samudra, right? And when we do the upasana of that Paramapurusha, when we make the effort to attain Paramapurusha, that is the most wise thing that anybody can do. So just like Parama Prakriti, Jiva is also Nitya Nivritta. So because the Jiva is limited, therefore when the Jiva takes the bhava of Paramapurusha, then one day it can be completely converted into that Parama Purusha. Brahma with Brahmaiva Bhavati. Right? That the Jiva merges into that Parama Purusha, into that Sukha Samudra, into that Ananta Sukha Sagara, and it just merges into that. So the question is, does the Jiva have that Samarthya to attain that Parama Purusha? Do we have the capacity to attain that Parama Purusha? So Parama Purusha Shakti is infinite, his Buddhi is infinite, his Vidya is infinite, his Smriti, his memory is infinite, everything that he has is infinite, right? And what we have is very limited. We don't have infinite Shakti, we don't have infinite Buddhi, we don't have infinite Vidya. Therefore, with our limited Buddhi and limited capacity, limited effort, how can we attain Paramapurusha? So his Paramapurusha's capacity to do work is infinite, and our capacity to do work is not infinite, it's very limited. We do a little bit, 5-6 hours we do work, we need some rest before we can do again, right? Or 10 hours we work and we need some break, right? So we have limited capacity. So Paramapurusha's capacity is infinite, right? So such a kind of Paramapurusha is Sarva Shaktiman. How can we attain him? Right? Do we have the capacity to attain him? Right? So we know that how Paramatma has created this world. Right? He created this world through his Leela. Right? So we can attain Paramapurusha only with his Kripa. If his Kripa is not there, then no matter what you do, you're not going to get it. Right? If his Kripa is there, then you will get the Samarthya, you will get the capacity to attain him. So that capacity to attain him is not our capacity, because we don't have that kind of capacity to attain Paramatma, but it is the capacity of Paramatma. It is the capacity of Paramatma that comes into the sadhaka, and this is the Leela of Paramapurusha. Right? This is the Leela of Paramapurusha. So what does Paramapurusha do is that when he created this Srishti, he divided himself into these different jivas. Right? This is the first phase of the Leela. When he divides himself into the different jivas, he says, Ekoham Bahusyam, and one I want to become many. Right? And in the second phase, what happens is that every jiva, which is a part of the Supreme, Paramapurusha gives that inclination in the jivas to move towards Paramatma, so that every unit being starts making an effort to move towards him. Right? In one phase, he divides himself into the different jivas, and then the second phase, he becomes the magnet where the different jivas are knowingly, unknowingly moving towards that magnet. Right? Just like a piece of iron is getting attracted to the magnet, like the jivas are getting attracted towards that Paramapurusha. So what happens is that even though Paramatma made himself into different infinite number of unit beings, he gave the capacity to them to run towards him. Right? So this inclination to run towards Paramatma is there in the jivas. Right? But this capacity to run towards him is because of the kripa of Paramapurusha. It is not due to our capacity. It is due to his desire, his abhilasha. Right? Who are we to question why are we running towards Paramapurusha? It is his design. It is his Leela. Right? We are all just players in his Leela, and we cannot question why is Paramatma doing like this, why is he not doing like that. We can't question. Who are we to question? It is his own Srishti. He will operate according to his own design. Right? He is the karta of this Srishti. So he will have his own rules. Right? When a human being does any work with love, then he gets more happiness. If somebody does any job with love, then they feel more happy. Right? But if somebody just does a job having the bhava of hatred, then they're not going to get happiness. Right? When they do something with love, they get energy, they get happiness. Right? So a bhakta who has this deep love towards Paramatma, he starts understanding everything about Paramapurusha. So he has this ragatmika bhakti towards Paramapurusha, that he wants to merge into that supreme entity. So the more and more and more and more he increases that love towards Paramapurusha, he gets more and more energy, more and more capacity. He gets to know everything about Paramapurusha, right? He gets to know every inch and bit of Paramapurusha. Then that bhakta realizes that he is no longer a bhakta. He himself has merged into that Paramapurusha. He has become Paramapurusha, right? Then before Srishti there was really nothing. Before Srishti, who was there? Only Paramapurusha was there. At that point in time, in the Nirguna Avastha, Paramapurusha did not have any duty, right? He did not have any work, right? He was just there. And then when he decided to create this Srishti, then he got more responsibilities, right? So what should we do? What should we do? We should increase the bhakti bhava to Paramapurusha. The more and more and more and more and more and more bhakti we have, the more and more and more love we have. Just like Meera Bhai, the amount of, she was a sadhika who had this deep love for Paramapurusha, for Krishna. She saw Krishna in everything, in every activity that she did, she saw Krishna, right? So that kind of deep love, when you have, then you get to know everything about that Paramatma, and you don't have any separate existence. You stop having separate existence, and then you have no choice but to merge into that supreme entity. You can't remain separate. And so essentially what we all have to do as sadhakas is increase that bhakti bhava towards Paramapurusha. When you increase that bhakti bhava to Paramapurusha, then what happens? Everything changes. Everything changes. Your individual existence is no longer there. Then you have no choice but to merge with that supreme entity. You cannot remain separate. Right? So the most critical thing for a sadhaka is to have that bhakti bhava. When you have that bhakti bhava, then Paramapurusha will be the one who will guide you and take you, right? There is no way you can commit any mistake, right? He will guide you and take you, and with his kripa, you will be able to merge into him, because otherwise we don't have that samarthya to merge into him. So only with his kripa, it is actually possible to merge into that supreme entity. So that is what I wanted to actually cover today. Any thoughts or comments? If not, we can actually go to our next pravachan. Okay, so today we are starting with a new pravachan. Can you see my screen, Bhagini?
हाँ भगिनी.
Okay, so we are actually starting with a new topic today, Yama and Niyama, right? So we have talked in the past about the Ashtanga Yoga, right? And right, there are 8 steps in yoga, and the 2 of them is Yama and Niyama, right? These are steps of morality. These are very, very important parts of yoga. And there are 2 types of morality: a simple morality, which is called sahajanaitikata, and second one is adhyatmic, spiritual morality, adhyatmic naitikata, right? So simple naitikata is being good to others, being honest, and not harming others, right? Those are all simple things that we do in the society. But simple morality is not sufficient. We have to learn what is spiritual morality. So there are 10 points, right? 5 in Yama and 5 in Niyama, and these are very, very essential in the path of sadhana. So in order to follow the path of sadhana, one need to understand these points of Yama and Niyama and commit to them, right? So one's ability to follow these principles become more and more developed as one does sadhana, right? But one has to know what these are, and one has to commit to following them to the best of one's ability, and one's ability will go on increasing, right, at the same time as one does sadhana. So now let us actually begin this new pravachan. So Pushpalata Bhagini, do you want to take the first paragraph?
Morality is the foundation of sadhana, spiritual practice. It must, however, be remembered that morality or good conduct is not the culminating point of the spiritual march. As a moralist, one may set an ideal for other moralists, but to do this is not something worth mentioning for a sadhaka, spiritual aspirant. Sadhana, in its very start, requires mental equilibrium. This sort of mental harmony may also be termed as morality. So, morality as such is said to be the foundation of sadhana, which is the spiritual practice. But it is also said that the morality or the good conduct is not the culminating point of the spiritual march. The morality helps, as a moralist, one may set is to influence, or they might be an idol for other moralists. But to do this is not something worth mentioning for a sadhaka who is a spiritual aspirant. Sadhana actually requires mental equilibrium. This sort of mental harmony may also be termed as morality. So morality is termed as the mental harmony to do sadhana, to start and do sadhana.
Okay, next you said Bhagini. So as I was saying earlier, Yama and Niyama are the initial two limbs in Ashtanga Yoga, right? So now we are going to read about Yama, and then later on we'll be reading about Niyama. So there are basically 8 limbs in yoga: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Jnana, and Samadhi. So actually when we practice all of these, ultimately all of these together.
Bhagini, please repeat. Yama, Niyama, Asana.
Okay, wait, I'll repeat. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, so we practice all of these, when we practice all of these together, and that ultimately culminates in Samadhi, right? The Yama and Niyama provide the base. So many people have heard about these 8 limbs, but it is not just enough to have heard them, right? In yoga we always talk about 99% practice, so it requires practice. So in order to practice something, first one has to know what the thing is, right? So just having heard about Ashtanga Yoga, and the first 2 are Yama and Niyama, and nobody knows what the points are, what they mean, then it is useless, right? So here what we are going to do is, we are going to learn about these, and also we are going to start practicing them, right? So we'll be going through them. The first one is Yama Sadhana, and we'll see that each one has a very, very deep meaning. What is ahimsa? When you say ahimsa, what is ahimsa? We'll be learning about that. It doesn't really mean what generally people think about, right? Most of the time what happens is, the problem is that people don't have the correct understanding, right? They don't know what it really means. They mean something different, and they have a very deep meaning, and that needs to be understood and followed, right? So ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, parigraha, all of these, right? So these are uh, these constitute, we'll be seeing each of them in this karapatra: ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. So these five constitute yama. So here it's saying that morality is the foundation of sadhana. Without having morality, sadhana is not possible, because the mind will be agitated, right? So if the mind is agitated, then mind will not be able to do sadhana, right? So morality of good conduct is not the culminating point of spiritual march, right? So here the point is that morality is not the goal of life. It is a means to the goal, but it's not the goal itself, right? At the next point, and this, as a moralist, one may set an ideal for other moralists, but to do so is not something worth mentioning for a sadhaka. Like a lot of people put on show, right? They just exhibit that they're such moralists, but that is a useless thing. If somebody is just trying to show, then it has no value, right? So what we are trying to show other people is to become a sadhaka, not to be merely a moralist. If somebody is merely a moralist trying to show others, I'm a big moralist, but they're not sadhaka, then they're really not a moralist, right? Ultimately, sadhana is what allows one to become a moralist, right? It is what which allows one to follow the path of spirituality, path of sadhana. So uh, morality is not possible without sadhana. Sadhana is not possible without morality. But somebody can read the points of morality and uh, come to understand what they are before learning sadhana and committing to those, right? As they begin doing sadhana, they'll become more and more established in the points of morality. So when we talk about this mental equilibrium, mental harmony, right, is that without morality the mind becomes agitated, because somewhere in the mind, in one's mind, is the understanding that they did not do the right thing. They may not be able to, right, not put it in words, but it does not allow the mind to be peaceful, right? If they have done something wrong, right, whether they accept it or not, but the mind knows it, right? The mind is agitated, right? And it doesn't allow the mind to be peaceful. If the mind is not peaceful, then one will not be able to focus in sadhana, right? So if one is not following the path of morality, then sadhana is not possible, right? So somebody has to first come to understand, study and learn what these things are, and then how they can be applied, right? So that is what this paragraph is saying, that uh, morality is spiritual morality is very essential and is the foundation of sadhana, right? Okay, let's go on to the next paragraph. Begin.
People often say, I follow neither a religion nor rituals. I abide by truth. I am nobody and I tell no lies. This is all that is necessary. Nothing more need be done to, or learned. It should be clearly understood that morality is only an effort to lead a well-knit life. It will be more correct to define morality as a dynamic force rather than a static one, because balance is the extrovertial balance in the extrovertial spheres of life is maintained by waging a pathless war against all opposite ideas. It is not an intro-external equilibrium. If the unbalanced state of mind takes a serious turn by pressure of external allurement, and if the mental disturbance is found to be intense, it is likely that the power for internal struggle and gain, and consequently the external equilibrium, the show of morality, may or may at any moment break down. So when people just say, I don't follow any religion or any rituals, and I only speak the truth without telling lies, uh, they just keep telling like that, and actually I need not learn anything more than this. This is a morality, but it doesn't lead to a well-knit life. So it will be, so morality is correctly defined as a dynamic force and a static one. Because when the balance in the extroversial spheres of life is maintained by waging, what we do is we have to constantly keep a waging a war without passing against all the opposite ideas in order for us to move forward. So this is this morality is not an intro-external equilibrium. That is, if the unbalanced state of mind takes a serious turn by pressure of external equilibrium, the internal equilibrium also gets, or the mental state gets disturbed, which may break down our thought of moving towards doing sadhana or so. So the morality will break down with all this, can be broken down by all this external oppositions. So we have to bring in that equilibrium to move further. That's what this paragraph emphasizes.
Yeah, Bhagini, nicely said. So that is what it's saying, that when a person says they're neither following religion or rituals, I abide by truth, I harm nobody, and I tell no lies, and that is all is necessary, nothing more to be done, right? So this is a proposed type of morality which should be a static one. Like this is a static one. This is what we call a simple morality. This is a static morality. The problem with this morality is that it is very superficial. It has no base to stand on, right? In the first paragraph we said that sadhana depends on morality, yama and niyama, and yama and niyama depends on sadhana, right? So we are going to be talking about this more as we move on. Ultimately, if somebody says that I abide by truth, I harm nobody, I tell no lies, right? On what basis? What is the foundation for that, right? For example, if somebody says that they won't tell a lie, then why is it that they don't tell a lie? Why is that they're not going to tell a lie? The foundation, what is the foundation, right? So when the weather is good, right, when you have lots of money and situation is easy, then everybody looks like a moralist. But when the situation is difficult, and when there is some challenging type of situation that has arisen, then in which situation it becomes difficult to tell the truth, and it becomes easier to not tell the truth. So how far is the strength that somebody has, that they abide by the truth, I harm nobody, I tell no lies? How far is this going to be able to stand when somebody is in deep problem? So what is the basis behind it, right? So when a person says that I follow truth and there's nothing else required, then there is really no basis for it. They just think that it's a good idea, that's all. If it is if it is if it's a good idea, so long as it seems to benefit them, but when it starts to feel like it's going to harm them, they're going to get in danger, then they may be willing to tell a lie, right? So the truth is satya. We are going to be talking about in depth what constitutes satya. But if there is no spiritual basis for this simple morality, for this morality, then it becomes easily punctured in difficult circumstances. So that's the most important point, right? So when somebody feels linked with Paramapurusha, feels that he is one with that supreme entity all the time, and when one feels dedicated to pleasing Paramatma because of that love with that Paramatma, with a deep love, then one is following the morality to please him. That is the foundation, that is the basis, that is the basis ultimately of morality. That is why we talk about spiritual morality and not just merely simple morality. Right? The simple morality has no basis to stand on, right? It says that somebody said that thing and they think it sounds good, and they follow it. But ultimately, only if somebody feels linked with that Paramapurusha, that situation they will be able to follow the morality even in difficult circumstances, right? So that is why when we talk about the dynamic aspect to it, it will be more correct to define morality as a dynamic force rather than a static one, right? So there is an internal commitment to follow the moral life, and if all you have is a commitment, right? So it's like how in the beginning we said, I follow the religion, I neither follow the religion nor rituals, I abide by truth, I don't tell lies. That is all that is. Then you know uh, so they have the commitment, but they don't have the basis. So if there is a difficult external circumstance, right, then they may give in. So when we say that it is not an internal external intro external equilibrium, what we mean is that ultimately it may come to pass that the superficial commitment that you made, which has no ground to stand on, can become challenged when the situation is difficult, right? So if the unbalanced state of mind takes a serious turn by external pressure, and if the mental disturbances are very intense, then it is likely that the power of internal struggle may yield to that external situation, right? And consequently the external equilibrium and the morality may break down, right? So this is not going to work in the life of a sadhaka. So that is not a strong foundation for morality. If somebody just says, I follow these, I believe in them as good, there's nothing more to it, right? Then when the weather is good, everything is good, but when the weather is bad, then it becomes very, very difficult. When the weather is bad, the trees can get uprooted and fall down, right? So the spiritual moralist is one who is following morality to please the supreme entity. Then they will be able to follow the morality even in difficult circumstances. That is the point here, right? Then it becomes a dynamic force coming from the deep love and attraction for that supreme entity, right? They know that Paramapurusha is there with them, right? And they know that they are following uh, the morality, the rules, to please the supreme entity. The following means that these are with them all the time, right? Whatever they do, right? Paramatma is watching, right? Paramatma is not watching as a policeman, but he's seeing everything. He's a Sakshi Satta. He sees everything. If I do a wrong thing, Paramapurusha is not going to be pleased, and my goal is to please that entity. So how can I do that? Then you just stop right there. There's no question of doing wrong thing. There can never be a question of doing the wrong thing, because if your goal is to please the supreme, right, is your goal is not just to follow the simple morality, then Paramapurusha is not going to like it. So there's no attraction even in difficult circumstances, right? So for a sadhaka, there is no difficulty in attraction to do wrong things in any circumstances, because he has a very strong foundation. That is the thing, right? Strong foundation is required, and that foundation can be got only in the supreme entity, that Paramatma. Okay, Bhagini, take the next one.
This is why morality is no doubt not the goal, not even a static force. The morality of a moralist may disappear at any moment. it cannot be said with any certainty that the moralist who has resisted the temptation of a bribe of 2 rupees would be able to resist the temptation of an offer of 200,000 rupees. Nevertheless, morality is not absolute values, is not absolutely valueless in human life. Morality is an attribute of a good citizen, and it is the starting point on the path of sadhana. So, the morality is not a goal. It is not even a static force. So, the morality, the moralist can be present very well this moment, but at any point of time, the morality can disappear by him going to some ways which we shouldn't do. Like for taking a bribe of 2 rupees, he will not take, but someday something can tempt him only because of his morality. Something can tempt him to take 200,000 rupees, for example. So, morality as such will not, just simple morality is not going to help. That's emphasized in this point. But it is not, we cannot say that it is absolutely valueless to the human life. It is just an starting point to the path of sadhana. Helps him to go into the path of sadhana.
Nicely said, Bhagini. Beautiful. So that is why morality is no doubt not the goal, not even static force, as we have been discussing. The morality of a moralist may disappear in any moment, right? So that kind of morality doesn't have depth to it. That is simple morality. The person who's saying, I neither follow religion, rituals, etc., I abide by truth, I harm nobody, that is all necessary. But they think that nothing more needs to be done. That kind of morality may fail any moment under pressure, right? Even then, right, the morality is not valueless in human life. The attribute of a good citizen, morality is a starting point, right? And morality is required to be a good citizen, and it is also the starting point for sadhana. So somebody should try to be good, even if they haven't learned sadhana, even if they don't know Yama and Niyama, right? What they understand is morality. They should try to follow that, right? Morality is not completely useless, right? Simple morality, but the thing is, the simple morality of a moralist may disappear any minute, right? Nevertheless, such morality is not absolutely valueless. It does have a value. People should try to be good with whatever they understand. Everybody should try to be good, right? And so we are not saying simple morality is not required. It does have some value, but ultimately for a sadhaka we need something more deeper than that, right? We need a spiritual morality. So go on to the next paragraph, Bhagini.
Bhagini. Moral ideals must be moral ideals must be able to furnish human beings with the ability as well as the inspiration to proceed on the path of sadhana. Morality depends on one efforts to maintain a balance regarding time, place, and person, and therefore there may be differences in moral code. But the ultimate end of moralism is the attainment of supreme bliss, and therefore there should not be any possibility of any imperfections of relativity. It cannot be said that the ultimate aim of human life is not to commit theft. What is desirable is that the tendency to commit theft should be eliminated. Not to indulge in falsehood is not the aim of life. What is important is that the tendency of telling lies should be dispelled from one's mind. The sadhaka starts spiritual practices with the principles of morality, of not indulging in theft or falsehood. The aim of such morality is attainment of such a state of oneness with Brahma, where no desire is left for threat and all tendencies of falsehood disappear. So, the moral ideas must be able to furnish the human beings with the ability and also the inspiration to go on the path of sadhana. So the morality depends on the one's efforts to maintain a balance regarding time, place, and the person. So there can be differences in the moral code, but the ultimate aim of end of moralism is to attain, to do sadhana and attain supreme bliss. And there should not be any positivity or possibility of any imperfections. It must be done perfectly. So we cannot say that it is the ultimate aim not to commit theft or not to tell lies, but he should not have that. He should he should stop the desire of doing that. The desire should be eliminated, which is going to make him uh, steal, or which is going to make him tell lies. So depending on certain situations, we may have to twist and tell, but it is not telling lies. So the ultimate this one is to eradicate all our desires, for which we will have to do the theft, for which we will have to commit theft, or for which we have to tell lies. And for this, the morality should help us, and that we should move to the path of sadhana to attain the supreme bliss.
Nicely said, Bhagini. Yeah. So we've been talking about the simple morality, right, and the spiritual morality. So we said that simple morality of a moralist can disappear at any time if there is pressure, right? But even then, it has some value in human life. People should follow simple morality to the best that they can, right? And simple morality depends on one's efforts to maintain a balance regarding time, place, and person, right? Therefore, there may be differences in the moral code. So for example, right, so depending on the time, place, and person, so today in the world, eating meat is not against the law, right? Eating meat is not against the law. So a simple moralist may think there is nothing wrong with killing animals for meat, right? But even though it is going against ahimsa, right? So the point is that this moral code in society, is based on time, place, and person, in depending on which country you are living, and it may not be against the law. It's not against the court of law to kill animals for meat, right? Even when you could be eating vegetables, right? Even when you don't have to kill animals, it is not considered immoral to do so, right? But the ultimate end of moralism is attainment of supreme bliss, right? Therefore there cannot be any possibility of any imperfections of time, place, and person, right? So just because it's not considered immoral to kill animals for food, right, when you don't need to do so, the sadhaka will not do so. The sadhaka will not kill animals for food, right? So the moral code is defined by imperfections of the time, place, and person in the world today. Our world is not sufficiently developed, right? But actually it is immoral, it is against the spiritual morality to kill animals for food when you don't need to do so for survival, when you could survive on vegetables and fruits. So what is the spiritual morality is is ultimately that you're doing sadhana, you're living in such a way that you're able to move towards the supreme bliss regardless of the deshakala patram, right? So in the spiritual morality there will not be any imperfections of time, place and person according to the standards of the society, right? So like for instance, in different parts of the world it's not considered to have human beings as human slaves, to keep human beings as human slaves, right? So that is not, it may not be considered immoral in such a country to have slaves, but that does not mean a spiritual sadhaka will do that, right? So according to the time, place and person, it was not a bad thing to do that, but that has the imperfection of the relativity, time, place and person. A sadhaka would never ever do that, right? So that is the first half of the paragraph about relativity and simple morality and spiritual morality. Ultimately the sadhaka will never be satisfied with the simple morality, with superficial rules, right? A sadhaka is a person who is doing sadhana and the mind is moving from imperfection to perfection. Then the tendency to do such things will be eliminated from the mind, right? Not committing theft, right? Not committing theft was his tendency to commit theft. Person who is doing sadhana, the tendency to commit theft will completely be eliminated, right? So sadhaka becomes more and more established in his feeling for Paramapurusha, and then the mind will naturally elevate, right? So when the mind elevates, they automatically follow the spiritual naitikata, spiritual morality, right? So the sadhaka knows that Paramatma is always there with them, so they should always act in such a way that will be pleasing to Paramatma. So when one does in such a one acts in such a manner, then all the negative tendencies will be dispelled from the mind, completely gone, right? This is the only way, right? This is the only way. Through sadhana you feel Paramatma with you all the time. He's your beloved, you want to please him. So when that becomes very established, then the tendency to do theft or tell a lie or other things get eliminated, right? So we are seeing the difference between simple morality and spiritual morality, and we'll be seeing more about it. And this Yama and Niyama is what we call as spiritual morality. Okay, so do you want to take one more paragraph, Bhagini?
Only one more, ma'am. No, Bhagini. Okay.
Okay, sure.
We'll finish with this page also.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
In the path of sadhana, moral education is important with this ideal of oneness with Brahma, because sadhana is not possible without such a moral ideation. Sadhana divide of morality will divert people towards material enjoyments, and at any moment they may use their mental power acquired with much hardship to quench the thirst for meager physical objects. There are many who have fallen from the path of yoga or tantra sadhana and are spending their days in disrepute and infamy. Whatever little progress they achieve through forcible control
disrepute.
Okay. Their days in disrepute and infamy. Whatever little progress they achieved through forcible control of their instincts was lost in a moment's error in pursuit of mundane pleasures. So, the path of sadhana, the moral education imparted with the oneness with Brahma, because this sadhana is not possible without such a moral ideation. So sadhana divide of morality will divert people to move towards the material enjoyments, and they at any moment they may use their mental power acquired with so much of hardship for taking some meager physical objects, which is not going to help them in any way. So the oneness, moving towards oneness with Brahma, ultimately gets destroyed. So we have seen such people who, after achieving so much of spiritual this one, just because of small physical, small attraction towards physical objects, they are spending their days in disrepute and infamy, and what they have achieved has lost in a moment's time because of their attraction towards mundane pleasures or undesirable pleasures, which is not going to give them any goal at all.
Yes, Padmi, nicely said. So this is a very important point that we have gotten here, and that is, it's actually twofold. Firstly, moral education is imparted with the ideal of oneness with Brahma. So what does that mean? So when people talk, normally when people talk about morality and moral life, the concept of Brahma is not part of that. Okay? People think of being moral as that I will not cheat other people, I will not steal, and those are no doubt included. But what do we mean when we say moral education is imparted with this ideal of one with Supreme Brahma? Here the point is that if one does not have the spiritual underpinning to one's moral fabric, then one does not have any solid foundation. It is just a hollow commitment, right? So, but behind there is really nothing. So one may not take a bribe for 100 rupees, but one may collapse under the attraction of 1 million rupees or 10 lakh rupees, right? We see this all the time, right? So, right, like if we see people in the politics, they do this all the time, right? They'll say, I don't take bribe at all, but then if you go and offer a huge amount, even they may slip, right? Even those politicians who think they are moral leaders, but they also fall down, right? So what happens is that when they get the opportunity to take an advantage of the system, then they are not morally prepared to withstand that attraction, right? So people are not thinking that they're going to become like that, but they become like that. They end up taking the advantage of the system, right? So that is a very actually good example. They do not have those intention. If you ask them when they were 17 years old if they would do such a thing, they would say never do it. But because of their moral commitment was not founded on anything deeper, then when they got that opportunity, then they made all sorts of excuses, right? They made excuses and they justified it. They befooled themselves. They cheated themselves into thinking that what they did was good when it was not good. Right? These people in the politics, they end up falling down for that very reason, right? Because they're standing on the simple morality. That is not enough. It needs spiritual morality. What is this idea? What is this ideal of oneness with Brahma? Right? Everybody starts out with the feeling of Dvitiya with regard to that Vitva bhava is there, that Paramapurusha is there, and I am there. There are two of us. And that is natural and it is fine. It's good. It should be like that. That is how it is in the beginning. Right? Literally until the point one becomes one with Paramapurusha, one has this feeling that there is me and there is Paramapurusha. So how do we generate that feeling of oneness with Brahma? The way we do it is by developing that bhakti. Bhakti also involves dvitva. You cannot have the notion of advaita, right? The bhakti does not work, because bhakti means having love for something else, that great infinite entity. So we're talking about the jiva having love for that Shiva, right? So the two entities, right? So that is the state of having gotten there and becoming one with the, until we get into the state of merging with that entity, till that there are two, right? So how do we become one with that supreme entity? The path of getting there is through bhakti bhava. falling in love with that supreme entity, the same thing that we talked at the beginning of the session today, right? And then the love becomes so powerful that one forgets one's individuality and ultimately merge in that entity, right? It needs two in order to become one. Ultimately, one does not start out with one starts with two. So so what do we mean by moral education is imparted with this ideal of oneness with Brahma? What it means is that what Paramapurusha wants, what his desires are, those are my desires. I do not have any individual desires. I do not have any desires separate, right? So that it is not like that I'm behind the curtain, I want this and I want that, right? So, you know, I got home and I want to go to the store, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to buy this, right? By doing all of that, I'm getting some relief. That means I'm having all those individual desires. Very typical, right? But oneness with Brahma can be attained by not having any separate desires, right? Whatever Paramatma wants, I want, right? So basically it means I follow the rules of Prakriti, and I also, you know, do sadhana to expand the reflection of the consciousness, right? So, and through that we can attain the oneness with Paramapurusha. Paramapurusha wants this. What he wants, I also want. It's not different. It's the same, one and the same thing. So first of all, one needs to come to understand what Paramapurusha wants, right? For us to follow that, right? So this is how the spirituality and the morality intersect, right? If one has a strong base that I must please Paramatma, then they will do everything in their capacity, right? Because with his pleasure, that will be fulfilling my goal. My goal is that he should be pleased, right? When you have that deep love, then, you know, you will do everything to please that person. Like just like two lovers, right? One lover will try to do everything to please the other person, right? Because that is all is there in their mind, right? So if one has that love for Paramatma, one naturally, it becomes quite natural to please that entity, right? So will Paramatma be happy if I take a bribe or if I steal, right? If I do the wrong things, if I go against Prakriti, will he be happy if I eat tamasic ahara, cheat others, right? Paramatma will never be happy, right? If somebody adopts that kind of approach, then they will never go wrong, right? Because the base is, there is a very, very strong base. He is there in everything I do. He's seeing everything that I do. I cannot do anything in secret, right? Every breath I take, he knows it, right? So then in that situation, it is impossible to go wrong, right? So Paramapurusha is watching us, and our goal is to please that entity. Then you'll never do anything wrong, right? So this is actually the moral education with the idea of being one with Brahma, right? What he wants, I want. I don't have any separate desires. I do not have any separate desires. All my desires are his desires, right? I don't have any link with my small I feeling, right? So the spiritual base is very essential for sadhana, right? People are doing sadhana and their mind is getting stronger and one-pointed. In the absence of the spiritual morality, the commitment to that morality will be missing, right? And the mind will get diverted, right? So that is what this paragraph is talking about, that the oneness with Brahma is essential to following moral life, right? And this commitment to following moral life is essential for sadhana. Okay, so we'll actually stop here. Any thoughts or comments?
Nice session, Bhagini.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Bhagini. So we'll conclude the session over here. Dhanyavadaha, namaskar.
Dhanyavadaha, namaskar.